Welcome to the Building Web3 podcast. Today we're joined by Humphries, a leading crypto content creator with 150,000 subscribers on YouTube. Zach shares his journey from sports broadcasting to crypto fame, discussing key macro trends, Bitcoin insights, and the rise of meme coins on this episode. Remember, nothing stated here is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 podcast. Today, my good friend Zach, he's a top content crypto creator. I totally fumbled that introduction, but hey, he's here and he's willing to talk about everything from macro to his companies, how he became a legend on YouTube. Zach, how many YouTube subscribers do you have these days? Just
closing
let people know.
Yeah, thanks for having me too, man. Appreciate that, Jax. And closing in on 150,000. It's a grind, man. But started in early 2021 and kind of lucked out with the bull run and a lot of retail interest. And, there's always kind of slowdown periods in your growth and whatever you're doing. And but there's also those times where things ramp up. We're kind of waiting for that next big ramp up, I think, right now with retail and things like that. But yeah, closing in on 150,000 and just showing up every day and seeing what happens.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into, crypto content creation. Like, walk us up to creating your first video and then how you progressed to 150,000.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story, man. So my backstory, what I used to do in my past life, I was a sports broadcaster on radio TV for about 7 years. And so that was always like a passion of mine. But I started kind of my entrepreneurial journey in 2019, 2020, had a few different companies, not really Web3 focused, but definitely was entrepreneurial and was kind of getting into investing more and trying to better myself, if you will. And I kind of stumbled upon crypto. Actually, what drew me in was Dogecoin. And I think a lot of retail people have that similar story. It kind of got me interested. It was like, what's going on with this? And I started creating content for about 3-4 months, just generally speaking about entrepreneurship and books I was reading and things like that. Eventually might go back to that kind of content. In fact, I started another channel that's doing a little bit of that. But I decided to put a crypto video out on that channel. I was like, it's not really working. Let me see if I pivot. And I put a crypto video out. And I woke up the next morning and had like 3,200 views and I gained like 50 subscribers. And to me at that time, it was like, oh my gosh, what is this? I think I found something. And literally I kind of like had that conversation with myself in the mirror. I was like, okay, do this every day, have fun with it and see what happens. And, the rest is kind of history. You meet a lot of great people. And I've been really lucky to network with people a lot bigger than me in the space. And just learning from them has been huge, going to these conferences and being willing to throw yourself out there. A lot of people willing to help. So it's been a fun journey so far, man.
Absolutely. And, 150,000 is a huge number. So let's talk a little bit about, like, if no one's visited your channel yet, what kind of videos will they see there? Is it like advice on trading? Is it macro? What exactly are they going to see on your channel?
Honestly, man, it's everything. I'm like a firm believer, because this is the way I'm, coming at it from an investor standpoint. Bitcoin and Ethereum make it a big part of my portfolio. And then honestly, with about 30 to 25%, be really risk adverse and speculate on all these new things, whether it's in the AI sector or gaming or meme coins. I'm all in on all of it, all while having what I like to say is like that backbone of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now with these ETFs, I think we can firmly say, and the fact is they make up 70% of the market, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum together make up 70%. So I look at that as kind of like a external savings account that can grow exponentially. It's almost like another 401k. And then with the other 30% is where I have fun. So I cover all of it, man, because what I found on YouTube is certain people come to my channel just for my take on the macro. Certain people just come for what am I looking at from a trading standpoint. Other people want to know what the hot new meme coin is or new narrative is or where Bitcoin could go. So I try to be somewhat of a jack of all trades. And I'm always very transparent with my audience too. Like, I never have it all figured out. This space is crazy. We're learning every day, and come along for the ride and let's see where we go.
Yeah, the learning every day aspect is quite incredible. So what's your research process like for, the channel itself? Or are you just so deep into crypto that you kind of just know, like, hey, every day I'm going to create a new video and I'll just kind of go off the top of the head? Or is there a lot of planning on it?
Yeah, I'm always kind of pivoting. I'm always kind of trying new things. Right now I've kind of settled into a new kind of schedule, if you will. I wake up, right around like 6:30 a.m. Eastern for about 2 hours. I just kind of get all the news in, make a couple trades, kind of set myself up. And then by 8:30 a.m. Eastern, I'm live on YouTube and X. Right now, combined, we're averaging right around like 1,200 with us concurrent, usually throughout our 1 hour live stream. And then I continue that live stream for another 2 hours from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30, but it's an X space. So, but I just keep it streaming on X and YouTube. But then people who want to be in real time, we call it the Crypto Breakfast Club. So we kind of branded that 3 months ago now. And so basically it's a 3 hour conversation, myself for the first hour, and then kind of everybody can join in hour number 2 and hour number 3. So far that's been going good, man. All while still putting out 3 to 4 videos a day on YouTube. I'm not somebody that does highly edited content. I don't edit hardly any of my videos. It's just kind of let me get it out there. If I screw up, I keep going. So it's not a one size fits all approach. I mean, some people do the highly edited stuff and it works. I think my audience kind of just craves the information and my perspective on things. And so that's what I try to give them and, just keep it moving, man. And the biggest thing with content creation, as you probably know, Jax, is just consistency. There's going to be some times where you're second guessing, what am I doing? Nobody's watching, but just keep doing it. And when you love it, it's easy. The thing is, people always talk about motivation. Like motivation is kind of fleeing, it comes and goes. But if you're dedicated to it and you just love what you do, it's easy to show up every day. And then, it's super rewarding when you see people, sending you emails like, oh my gosh, you changed my life, or you gave me this whole new perspective, or I started a separate business and all of that. And that keeps you going for sure.
Yeah, I'd also say, and it's very interesting that you've tried multiple different formats, is like when I first started, I wanted to do some kind of like writing because I wanted to be more similar to like Dan Coe. And I was like, well, I actually hate writing. So it was much easier. Like people just need to try a few different things and just find what you gravitate to. For me, talking on a mic is quite comfortable. But I'm very interested in, so you're running essentially 3 hours of Twitter Spaces, and then you still are producing 3 videos a day. Like that is an incredible schedule. And you're live streaming, so on YouTube and X at the exact same time, right?
Yeah. And we built up a big audience on X too. We're over 101,000 there on X. And man, I'm really excited about what Elon wants to do. He's getting all these money transmitter licenses. So I've really made it a focal point to grow that platform. And it's big in the crypto and blockchain community, probably bigger than YouTube right now. What I've found, just an interesting tidbit, I think when new people come into this space, they go to YouTube. When they've been in this space and they never leave, they hang out on Twitter or X. So I think, I guess I'm trying to play in both of those arenas. So I need to grow that platform on each. But yeah, man, it's a crazy schedule, but every day's different. That's the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur and being in crypto. You never know. Like today we woke up, the market's crashing. Oh my gosh, what's happening? Versus, oh my gosh, the market's going insane. Or whatever it is, right? There's always a narrative. There's always a way to kind of analyze it, give your 2 cents. But it's exciting, man. And I love it. I make the jokes all the time. Like, I don't know what the new Netflix show is, man. I just, that doesn't excite me. If I'm not spending time with family and friends or traveling or something like that, I'm doing this, man. Like, this is it. And I love it.
Yeah, very interesting what you said about the two different platforms, because yes, in my experience, even like the crypto projects, many of them don't even have YouTube channels, which I find to be quite odd. Like when I was a developer, right, I would go and look up like coding tutorials on how to set up nodes or things like that. I'm just like, how are you guys not doing this? Is it your experience that many people in like even crypto companies are not really prioritizing YouTube at all?
It's weird. Yeah, there's definitely a shift. And I don't think YouTube's necessarily like, gone or whatever from the crypto community, but it's definitely retail focused. And we've just had a lack of retail, since the whole SBF thing and since we entered the bear market. And even though we're out of that phase, retail really hasn't come back. And a lot of that can be pointed at the macro and, look what prices are at the grocery store. People are not very risk adverse right now. They're not willing to take a chance as much as they are when times are better. But I think with the emergence of Twitter, the emergence of X, now I always say Twitter too, the emergence of X and what Elon is doing, I think has certainly, proliferated, a big boom in content creation there. And what he's doing with video in particular there, and that's really been growing. I think it's only going to get bigger. I think eventually, he's said this, he wants to create the everything app. And a lot of that has to do with finance. We know he's pretty bullish on the whole crypto narrative as a whole. So I think there's some big things to come, and I think X is really the platform that's growing at a rapid rate compared to anything else, right now in blockchain and crypto.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to? Is that there's maybe like a big anonymous community and writing is a little easier? PFP culture is a little bit more popular. Twitter Spaces, you don't need to show your face. Like, I'm always curious, like, why Twitter?
I think all of that is true, and I think this whole narrative of free speech is a big component too. I think people feel like they can go to X and be themselves, dox if they want to dox, not dox if they don't want to, and they can contribute to the conversation. And the thing is with some of these other platforms, we don't really know if they're fully behind the crypto movement. There are always rumors. I used to have a big TikTok presence. I've had like 3 or 4 different TikToks, but they've all been taken down. So I'm like, okay, that's that kind of sucks because it's a huge platform, a lot of exposure there, but obviously they're pretty wishy-washy on the crypto space right now. And I think the same could be said for a lot of other platforms. So I think what you said is true, and I think people just feel comfortable. They can be themselves. And the dynamic of X Spaces, though, is super fascinating. It used to be Clubhouse or whatever until X kind of did their version of it. But when I'm on YouTube, right, it's kind of like this one to many, and it's an imaginary audience. There's no feedback. There's no immediate feedback. I get comments, right? I get likes or whatever, but that's passive feedback versus active feedback in an X space where I bring somebody up and immediately they tell me, hey, I've been listening to you since 2021 and just want to thank you. And you don't get that on YouTube. And that's cool for the user. That's cool for that person saying it. And it's cool for me as a content creator, right? Because you get to like build and foster these really rich relationships versus like that one-to-many platform like YouTube. It's great, but it's like that, one person sitting in a big room talking to the people, and them not really giving that immediate feedback. So long-winded answer, but I think both platforms have, power in their own right for sure, though.
And when you're on Twitter Spaces, are you doing audio only, or are you streaming your video as well?
I'm doing audio only, but so I'm streaming them. So if you're just listening to it on X or YouTube, you can see me. Now I'm not always talking because like there's feedback going back and forth. But if you just want to be on the X space, you could just do that and just do audio. So you can kind of pick. That's why kind of why I set it up like that. So if you're just going to be passively listening and you want to see me and you want to see my screen, so things we'll be talking about, like I'll be pulling things up on screen, whether it's a chart or a story or something like that. So really, I'll let the user decide. Do you want that, or you just want to? Are you traveling? Are you driving? Just be on the space then, and just listen in and take in the information that way.
Yeah, I'm always interested to see how other people do it because when I joined the GM show as a guest, they were like, hey, we use StreamYard, we stream it on YouTube, we stream it on Twitter Spaces, and it seems very similar to your setup.
Yeah, that's what I use too. StreamYard's been awesome. It's template-based format. I know some people go back and forth on that. But again, with my style of content, I don't have a lot of stuff going on and green screens and stuff like that. So it works. And, it allows you to stream on different platforms really easily. And I'm not much of a tech guy either, man. It gets me all out of whack. So I rely on some other people to help me out with that stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the better your setup becomes in terms of like the more gizmos and gadgets you have, like, yeah, it improves the quality, but it also just improves the complexity. Like things will just break. I remember having this like Rodecaster setup. And for one of the podcasts, the other person couldn't hear me. I was like, it took us like 15 minutes to figure it out, but that stuff just happens.
What's funny too, man? Like some of my best videos have been me like walking in an airport and there's like something breaking news and I just pull out my phone and do it. I think that holds a lot of people back. I think that's actually a really important point because a lot of people don't get started in their content creation standpoint or journey because of this thing where like they're like, oh, well, I'm not technical. I got to think about all this stuff. Honestly, man, if you have a phone and you have something to say, people will watch, and your audience will gravitate toward you for the information. And again, I think it depends on the type of content you're creating, but don't let that hold you back. If you're somebody out there, whether it's in blockchain or whatever else, if you have a phone, which we all do pretty much, you could do it. You could start just with that, and just go.
Yeah. And another thing I would tell people is don't be, even though I'm neurotic about the numbers, is try not to be neurotic about the numbers because you'll go to a lot of these crypto conferences, maybe like a side event, and you'll see somebody speaking to like an audience of 6 people. And then you'll get 200 views online. You'll be like, failure.
True.
like, it depends who the audience is. If it's all Web3 founders, that's like highly valuable. Like you'd love to be on stage talking to 5 of them.
100%. And it's what's that old like adage? Just have like 100 really loyal people. And sometimes that's more important than having 50,000 people who listen to you every once in a while. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, I've seen, and them as content creators, those people who have been there since day one, and you're like, man, that is really cool. Like I've built this, and I've met a lot of them personally at events and stuff like that. So yeah, man, don't get too bogged down in the numbers. Obviously, like you want to see growth overall, and as long as you're growing a little bit every day, that's kind of my checks and balances. As long as I'm growing a little bit every day, some days it's going to be better than others. I'm in a good spot. I know I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been in this YouTube game, this X game for a long time. If somebody's about to start their content creation journey, there was a few pieces of advice. It seemed like one, just get started irrespective of what you have. 2, it was like, don't stress too much about the numbers, just like incrementally better with each video and incrementally growing. What other advice would you give to like new creators starting out?
Don't be somebody you're not. I think the biggest thing is like you get on camera and you feel like you maybe have to like do something different or be somebody different or, say something that people want to hear. Just be yourself, really enjoy it. Love what you're talking about. Like select something that you're passionate about and just be yourself, because once you grow that audience and that like you're not faking it, it's the best feeling in the world, because you're like, oh, I just have to get up and be me and do my thing here, and people listen. But I think a lot of people overthink that a little bit, and they're like, oh, I've got to like be like this person, or I've got to emulate this person because they do it this way and it works. Do it your own way, and have fun with it, be passionate about it, and be consistent.
Yeah, and I was actually reading a Russell Brunson book last night. I highly recommend if people are into marketing at all. And he talks about like this path of becoming an influencer, so to speak. He's like, all right, first you're the dreamer, and then he's like, most people should become a reporter. Just start interviewing people you really like and emulate their content, because then like you don't have to have your own original ideas. You can just like help somebody else promote theirs, and then by talking to so many different people, you then synthesize their ideas, kind of meld it into your own, and then you become like the framework guy. And I was like, wow, I was just reading that last night. I was like, that's brilliant.
Dude, that's so true. And I think too, like one of the things I do is like cover the news, right, on YouTube and X. And, I used to kind of overthink this, but in reality, it's like people would rather listen to somebody talk about the news sometimes for 4 or 5 minutes than read it themselves. It's more interactive.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So don't overthink it. Add some original thoughts and some original ideas, like sift through the article, get a couple things how does this make you feel? Like internally ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Interject that into the video, give them the news. There you go. That's a video.
Well, if you really think about the news, it's just somebody already synthesizing an event that they saw or read about. And then you're just like further synthesizing it to your audience based on your like channeled through your prism of experience.
100%. 100%. And people will select whose voices they like to hear. And, I would say, try to get a lot of different voices. If you're somebody, craving for content in this space in crypto and blockchain, I always say you should have like 8 to 10 people in your Rolodex of people, right? Get those different perspectives, different ideas, and watch them talk about the same thing. Like today's a perfect day. The market's crashing, and what does this person say about it? What's this person's perspective? What's this person's perspective? And then kind of formulate your own ideas around all of that.
Now, when you're looking to formulate your own ideas, are there certain creators in the space that you're like, I love the way this person thinks. Like I always look to them, and then
100%. Yeah. So I think one of the important things is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. And I think we talk about strengths a lot, but knowing your weaknesses is really important. And like one of mine is I'm not a very big technical analysis guy. I know enough to be dangerous here and there, but I go and listen to a lot of the heavy TA guys, and people in the space that can do that way better than I can, and then look to learn as much as I can and interject where I can. And then honestly, I take that and then add kind of the macro to it, because that's kind of where my brain gravitates toward. It's more of like human psychology and how are people feeling and what's the temperature in the room and how does this impact the markets. So I think that's really the big thing. And there's quite a few content creators who I watch in that realm. Benjamin Callen is one. I was actually just at his private event in Nashville after the Bitcoin Nashville event. Awesome guy. He's almost got 1 million, I think, on YouTube now. He's been around for a while. Invest Answers is another very analytical, technical person. So I try to find people who are really opposite of me. You know what I mean, Jax? Like people who are like have that whole different way of thinking where I'm like, okay, my brain doesn't work like that, but I can still learn from those people and still have that, little bit of a base of a knowledge on that side of things.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's nice to hear from a macro investor in the space. Let's talk a little bit about if people aren't as into the investing landscape. Obviously, TA is technical analysis. Let's talk about what is macro, and let's talk about some of the macro trends you've seen on today. We've had a very down market, so maybe we can we can hypothesize as to like what's happened over this past 6 months.
Yeah, for sure. The way I look at this from a macro standpoint, this is where I like to start. So if we look at like the evolution of humans and the evolution of technology, we think about all these things that changed our world drastically, right? So we go through these different eras in time. We went through the agricultural era, and that was a huge boom, right? It was like this new way of doing things. And then we went to the Industrial Revolution, right? And this changed everything. It flips things on top of their head and makes you think totally different. And the world's changing drastically. Then we had the information age, which was the birth of the internet, right? And the ability to be interconnected and globally connected and do business globally and reach the masses through all these different mediums. Amazing. And now we're getting ready for the digital age, or we're kind of already in it. And wrapped up in here is AI, robotics, and blockchain and crypto. And this is going to change the world drastically. Then we kind of take it back to, okay, the most recent big shift was the internet. Let's take a look at how the internet was adopted versus how blockchain is being adopted. Blockchain and crypto is being adopted at a very similar rate than the internet. We're just at the infancy stages. We're only at like the 6% on that bell curve. Everett Rogers is a really interesting theorist. He talks about how new technologies are adopted over time. And usually, like that first 5% are like what he calls the innovators. We're basically just in the innovator stage. We're not even reached, I think his next stage would be called the early majority, which I think makes up like 13 or 14%. We're just now entering that phase until we get to like the big late majority. And then, toward the back end of that bell curve, then you have the people who are still getting in the late majority and the laggards, people who adopt it, just like the internet, right? Our grandparents were the last ones to adopt it, right? And similarly with crypto and blockchain, we're just so freaking early. And I think that is really something so important, especially for new investors to understand. It takes time for these big shifts to happen, but we're in the midst of one right now with AI, robotics, and blockchain.
And macro wise, like when we're looking at this market, we see like huge run ups in like Bitcoin prices, and then obviously like a decline. Like many people will be looking at the markets and like joining your spaces. And what would you like attribute this larger like run up in Bitcoin prices into the halving and then kind of the tumble that we've seen?
Institutional demand. It's very interesting. That's very different than the previous cycle we went through. So if we go back to 2021, it was kind of the perfect storm for retail, right? We had the pandemic take place. People had more time. People were at home more, so they were on the internet more. They were on social media more. They had some money in their pockets as well. They were also questioning, if they liked what they were doing. And they were also trying to find side hustles and jobs. I have so many friends I remember who, were doing Instacart during the time or whatever. Somebody might have got laid off, and how can I make more money? It gave people time to think and really actually, in some ways it was a good thing. I know pandemic wasn't, but in some ways it was, I think, for some people, because it gave them that opportunity to say, do I really like what I'm doing? Or how can I better myself? Maybe I should start investing? So it was a perfect storm for retail, and it was very retail driven. This go around, it's been all institutions, coming in with the ETFs. We know for, a fact that back in October, there's some on-chain analytical information that BlackRock and the big players dating back from October 2023, they were buying up Bitcoin at 25,000, 30,000 in droves. And we've seen that run up all the way to new all-time highs, which has never happened around the halving like that. Usually it takes like 6 months after the halving to really have that big run up. But right now, we're in this interesting time period because there's still all this institutional demand that's slowly coming in. Now we have an Ethereum ETF too. We're just waiting for that to be met with retail demand. And, some of that obviously is out of our control with inflation and recession fears and things that are happening in the macro as it relates to wars and all of that. But eventually it will come. And yeah, that's kind of my take on, where we've been the last 4 years if we had to narrow it down. But nonetheless, blockchain and crypto is growing. And right now it's just the institutions turn to kind of move the needle.
Yeah, it was quite interesting when the ETH ETF rolled out. There didn't really seem to be that much of an effect. What do you kind of attribute that to? Because the Bitcoin ETF was huge.
Yeah,
ETH ETF.
It's a great question. I think it's just newer. It's less understood. We saw a lot more videos from BlackRock and Fidelity and things like that of just having to explain to people what smart contracts are and what the benefits are and how it's different than Bitcoin. Bitcoin has people have a pretty good understanding, even if they're not invested in Bitcoin, at least what the general thesis is, right? Okay, this is like the new gold, right? It's a store of value. It's hard coded. They have some basic principles, and it's just been around longer. So naturally, I think institutions are going to be attracted to that, and it's larger. It's more solidified. Makes up 56% of the overall market. So all of those sort of things, I think, boost the demand. But I think the Ethereum demand will be there. It's just going to be a slower grow as more and more people understand it, find the value, and I think it'll grow, but it'll just take a little bit more time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in terms of Ethereum takes a lot more. I'll even say just brain power to understand, like a lot more primitive knowledge. And Bitcoin historically was a lot simpler. Yeah, digital gold. But now Bitcoin itself is becoming almost more like Ethereum. Like there's BRC20s, there's runes, there's ordinals. It's actually becoming a more complex asset every single day, as we saw from the Nashville conference.
Yeah, for sure, man. It was crazy how much of a presence there was there or an appetite, I should say, for ordinals and smart contracts and DeFi on Bitcoin. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's being hit with some what would I say? People pushing back on it, I guess, for lack of a word there. But yeah, from some of the Bitcoin maxis, and I get that too. But it's interesting, man. It's going to be really fascinating to watch ordinals and smart contracts and DeFi play out. We've already seen some successful, projects like Stacks is one that comes to mind, STX in the top 100 that's operating in that space. But yeah, for sure, man. But I think the institutions understand Bitcoin from those core values of like, okay, this is a better version of gold, right? Like a 30-year-old's not investing in gold, but they're investing in Bitcoin. Like just these basic kind of like, okay, we can understand kind of what this is, moving forward.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about conferences, because we met at a conference. We, of course, like conferences. What are some of the value of going to these crypto conferences? Because like it's tempting for content creators just to stream in your house all day.
Yeah, for sure. Get out and touch grass, right? But yeah, 100%, man. I would say go in there because you can get a feeling for the market. You can get a feel, but the feeling you get when you're actually there, I mean, you can't replicate it, and just the whole networking aspects. You can network a lot on social media now, but nowhere near as much as in person. I mean, the best relationships I've formed, I've met people in person in the space. The best companies I've worked with, I've met them at conferences. You know what I mean? It's just there's no match for that still human to human, face to face interaction. And then just like this most recent one, the Bitcoin Nashville event, just the energy that you feel when you're walking around there. I mean, it's just you can't duplicate it. I was out in Dubai in April too, and I'm going to Singapore here next month, and that's the great thing about it too. It's just global. I mean, you get to kind of test the waters and see different parts of the world and what their take is on where we're going and everything. You'll see different faces at different places, but yeah, I love it, man. And I can't wait for Bitcoin next year in Vegas. That's going to be insane, man. That's going to be awesome.
I think it was also so crazy that President Trump was there, because this was something Bitcoin, when I'm going back in 2012, when I discovered it, it was something we bought fake IDs with online. And then to have like 12 years later, the hopefully the next president speaking at the conference about this magical internet money I used to play with in 2012 is just, to me, mind boggling.
it's wild that it's finally a conversation, on the table here as elections come up. It's insane. And I'm firmly believe all press is good press, anytime it's being talked about. And, now I guess with Harrison, she's saying they want to rekindle relationships. That's great. I mean, awesome, and he said a lot of bullish things about, where he wants the industry to go, maybe even strategic reserves and no CBDCs for the next 4 years if he gets in, among some other really important topics. But the fact that the conversation is being had on both sides now and that it's a legitimate topic that could sway the election, I mean, that's insane. And it's awesome for us.
Yeah, insane. And you talked about going to Dubai. We'll be in Singapore in about a month. Talk a little bit about how you see like crypto culture be different in the different geos. Like, of course, it's worldwide, but I remember talking with Casey from the GM show. He's like, Asia might be 10 years ahead of the US in terms of adoption.
I'm looking forward to that too. I haven't been there yet. I'm in Asia in general, and I haven't been there for a crypto conference. But I will say, when I went to Dubai, I mean, just they're light years ahead of us too. I mean, the fact that you can, buy a lot of different things, especially like high price item tickets with Bitcoin, with USDT. I watched my friend buy a brand new watch with USDT, and the transaction was done in like a few seconds. I mean, just insane, right? So it's fascinating. It's exciting too, because I think eventually the United States is getting there. It's taking a little longer than usual. Because, we've always been at the forefront of innovation. I hope they don't let this one slide away or slip away. But I think it's going to happen, man. But it's great to see that, you even take the ETFs, right? Like Canada has had ETFs 3 or 4 years before we just had them. They've had them for a while. So it's fascinating to watch how different parts are kind of trying to gain that edge, right? And get there first. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what it's like in Asia too, because I've heard the same thing, but haven't had a chance to experience it yet. But super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to go as well. I still need to buy my tickets. Hopefully, they're not just like egregiously high. But let's talk. Yeah. Just like, oh Lord, fly from Medellin, Colombia, straight to Singapore might not be the easiest. But let's talk a little bit about any kind of trends you see moving forward. I know you're the macro guy. Are there anything on the horizon that you're worried about, and anything that you're like particularly excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little worried about a lot of the altcoin market. Surprisingly, I'm more worried about like a lot of these VC funded big projects compared to meme coins, because it's interesting, right? Because okay, like the VC style big type of investments, I think a lot of that capital is flowing into Bitcoin and Ethereum, versus the retail really likes meme coins. So it kind of leaves this gray area of what about all this other quote unquote great tech or VC backed projects. I'm a little concerned about that. So I've kind of strategically placed myself a little bit more into Bitcoin and Ethereum, heavier there, and really with my gambling bags or my gambling money, a lot more into meme coins, because that's where the retail interest and demand is. So that's kind of my take there. We've seen Bitcoin dominance really tick up. I think a lot of that's with the ETF. I think that trend continues, but eventually we get a rotation into Ethereum. I'm just wondering how much of that trickles down into some of the other alts, right? I do think the RWA narrative is going to be really big. The whole real world asset, the tokenization of everything. We've heard Larry Fink really switch to that conversation right after ETFs have been released. So I'm looking at projects like Chainlink, like Ondo Finance, and like Pendle, which are all 3 in the top 100. Not financial advice, as maybe some big players in that RWA narrative. I'm not trying to overthink it. There's a lot of smaller caps there too, but I think that's a narrative that could really pop off here if we get that big bull run we're expecting. I'm fascinated with gaming. It's just not happening as fast as I thought it would. But I think in terms of an opportunity to onboard new people, what better way? I mean, gaming and mobile gaming in particular, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. Imagine some of these great games that people play are brought onto the blockchain, and you could be trading in-game assets as NFTs, and they don't even know that they're interacting with the blockchain and crypto, because that's really where we need to get. We need to get people just doing it and getting away from what do I have to do it, right? Like making it easy. And I think gaming could definitely do that. That's another sector I find interesting. And we had the whole metaverse craze back in 2021, 2020. I think there's something there. I just don't know what that looks like. You know, I think NFTs are going away from the PFP stuff, in my opinion, to real world use cases for NFTs, which there are a lot of them. So that's kind of just brain dumping a little bit. But overall, man, if I could simplify it, it's like Bitcoin and Ethereum, make that the backbone of my portfolio and have a ton of fun trading a bunch of meme coins, take profits accordingly, because that's where the retail interest is, and drive that capital back into Bitcoin, back into Ethereum, back into stocks, back into my business, back into cash, you know?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I had to mention, because you mentioned Pendle. Pendle was one of the toughest interviews I ever had to prepare for, because Pendle's product is not that straightforward. If you ask me, it's like you have to really understand like interest rate swaps to really get it. But very bullish on their team. Like when I was talking with them about like surviving the bear market, you know, it takes strong teams to really keep the spirit alive.
For sure, man. I mean, would you agree that the RWA narrative is kind of like, if not the hottest, one of the hottest? I think like
I would say yes, RWA, because one, there's the institutional money behind it. So if BlackRock is going to push it, if like Morgan Stanley is going to get behind it, when I used to work at BlackRock, right, like you might have a financial instrument that would be T plus 2 or 3 to settle, which means today plus 3 days, like the trade would settle in 3 days. That's insane in the modern age. Like, how could that be? Or there might be like misaccounting of assets with blockchain. Obviously, like that is very difficult to do, and everything would be accounted for. So whenever there's financial incentives, I'm not necessarily bullish on anything that's like, hey, and we're going to do tokens on top of tokens that let you restake these tokens. Like that all just seems like derivative on top of derivative on top of a sandcastle. But yes, very, very bullish on like the real world asset space. I would say still we probably need a lot of regulation changes in order to realize that. I would say the AI space is quite interesting from a decentralized AI perspective. I do a lot of episodes on that just because like we've seen issues with like Google's LLMs, like Black Vikings. We didn't have those, obviously. Like there needs to be something outside, and it was kind of like we were talking about with X before. So we need something that like is relatively unbiased. The other place I'm pretty bullish on, no financial advice, of course, is Ton, specifically because there's 900 million active users on Telegram. And when my mom goes to a website, right, she's not like, oh, wow, this uses MongoDB in the background. That's how I see like the future of blockchain has to be. It's like crypto just has to provide a better alternative to people. And they don't necessarily need to be like, oh, this is crypto. They just need to say like, oh, this worked better.
You're right, 100%. And not even necessarily know that they're interacting with the blockchain. Yeah, I agree 100%. Speaking of AI, what do you think about the ASI, artificial superintelligence? They're kind of combating like the centralized AI projects out there, or big companies that we know like Google and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But
now, I haven't interviewed them specifically. I just interviewed Venice, which they do completely like decentralized LLM. So like using Hugging Face, and they don't really put their finger on the scale. So like image generation. I'm bullish on that space. I think it will take a good bit of time for them to catch up. Essentially, a lot of the decentralized AI narrative, aside from infrastructure, is highly predicated on the goodwill of Facebook releasing like really finely tuned models. So there used to be, when I used to work in big tech, there used to be this roadmap, right? Where if you're not number one or number two in the market, then you go open source, because open source is a way you can pull your competitors' clients out of their ecosystem. So at Google, we had this thing called Borg, which was essentially like a way to containerize assets. And they released it open source as Kubernetes to try to get people to migrate away from AWS into GCP. But if Google was like the predominant force, they would have never released that. Never.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes sense too. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But that whole idea of like mergers and acquisitions, like we saw those 3 AI companies merge together. I think we're waiting for that to happen in crypto and blockchain too, because do we really need all of these things out there? Like eventually we're going to see some consolidation. And maybe it's happening now. I mean, we're still waiting for the big altcoin boom. It could be starting to, happen right now. More of a consolidation between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then maybe there's some other big winners. Who knows? Chainlink, Ondo, or whoever it ends up,
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like many of these projects have really cool tech, but until we're solving like real world problems, it's a lot of just things built on sandcastles. I know many of my listeners will not like to hear that, but like, hey, unless you're solving, like you get paid in proportion to the problem you solve for somebody.
Yep. Yep. And it's a fun time because, you could still speculate on all these things. And,
Mhm.
from a trading perspective, trade. I say all the time, outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum, everything's a trade. I mean, so it's like investing. I look at it like Bitcoin and Ethereum is investing. Everything else, I'm just trading. Some of them are longer term trades than others. Some of them are an hour, some are a day, some are a week, some are a month, some are 4 months, some are a year. Outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum, though, everything is super, super speculative. Who knows what's going to happen? It's fun to speculate. That's why I think it's important if you're an active investor to keep your eyes peeled on what's hot, what's the narrative. Like late last year into early this year, tons of money could be had speculating on AI projects. Will they last? Who knows? Most of them won't, but you could still make successful trades in the meantime based on that whole Nvidia push, and everybody got so excited with AI. There's a lot of those different scenarios that'll play out. Maybe that'll be RWA this go around. This cycle.
And I know I wanted to cover, because you mentioned, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Any interest in Solana, or you're not considering it? It's still the big two, not the big three.
No, I like Solana too. Solana would be, it's one of my top positions. And for me personally, I've traded a ton of Solana meme coins with one goal: to stack more Solana. And I've been super transparent about that. It's like, why not? Like, that's where the money's flowing. That's where I'm going. My end goal is to accumulate more Sol. And I think there's room for some Ethereum competitors, right? Whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And I think Solana has the best chance to be, we'll say the silver to Solana's gold, or to Ethereum's gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And now to wrap up real quick, like, I know many people are going to listen to this, be like, hey, where can I get involved with Zach? Where can I keep in touch with him? Where can I join his spaces? So shout out any kind of social links you have and places people can get involved with what we're working on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's just Zach Humphries on YouTube. You'll find me there. And then it's Z_Humphries over on X. So you can find me there on X. Be careful. There's a ton of fake accounts. I wish I could, do something. But on X especially, there's a ton of fake ones. Just make sure it's the one with the verified thing. And because you know how people are. They're always trying to formulate different, things and get you. I've had emails where people are like, oh, I'm in your new trading group. I'm like, that's not me, man. Please report that page. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Make sure it's just the right one. But
I had something, a crazy hack the other day where unfortunately I didn't fall for it, but somebody sent me a fake Zoom link. And I was like, what?
I've heard about that. Yes. Yep. I've heard about that from a couple different people recently, man. It's crazy out there, man. Just never click on anything you don't know where it came from or whatever. I mean, if you question it, don't click it, right?
Very fair. All right. So everyone, be safe with the links. I'll put Zach's real links in the description. So feel free to click on those, but always, check twice. And Zach, thank you so much for coming on here, and let's get back to building the future of Web3.